Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. For me, it's always evening because this is All Things Horror with me, your host, Matthew Miller, expert on all things supernatural, horror, scary, paranormal, and all that good stuff. I am here in the All Things Horror studio, which is in the basement of an abandoned castle I found in the middle of a bewitched forest. Here in the basement, we have a nice little room with the good acoustics, but the wall behind me, I think there's just some rust stains on the wall, so I'll try to clean that later. Yes, well, this is the Halloween special for All Things Horror, and what I'm going to do tonight is read to you my book, one of my books. I'm a horror writer. I have 9 horror novels written so far and more to come, and I'll show you how to check those out in just a moment. What I'm going to do is to read you Volume 1 of the Gravediggers series. The Gravediggers are a punk rock band who keep running into things supernatural. It's comedy and it's comedy horror. And Volume 1 is called Blood Feud, a punk rock vampire story. So I invite you to simply close your eyes, listen carefully, and enjoy the theater of the mind. Chapter 1. A Boy Goes to War. West Virginia, January 7th, 1865, U.S. Civil War. It was hard enough being a 7-foot-tall teenager without also having to dodge flying musket balls. Asa Harmon McCoy was finding this out the hard way. Like so many Civil War soldiers, Asa had been just a teenager when he had left home to fight for the Union against the Confederacy. Also, like so many soldiers in all wars, he had held a glorified view of it until the bullets had started flying, and then he had instantly realized it was hell on earth. So, he thought it was a little ridiculous that he found himself on a battlefield, holding a musket and wearing a blue uniform, looking across at the enemy, a bunch of boys just like him, just as scared and just as awkward. He was supposed to shoot and kill them, but he really didn't want to do that. After all, they were fellow Americans, and even some of his own family were fighting for the Confederacy. What if he accidentally killed family? Could he ever forgive himself? In any case, Sergeant Tapnick was shouting at everyone to shoot, so he couldn't just stand there doing nothing. He loaded his musket and pointed it in the general direction of an enemy troop who was also loading his musket frantically. The poor boy looked about 13 years old, barely old enough to even function without his mother. The enemy saw Asa aiming at him, and a look of panic and terror washed onto his face as he realized what was happening. Asa just couldn't do it. He fired the bullet into the ground in front of the poor boy. When the boy understood what Asa had done, he smiled, nodded, and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Other boys were not so lucky. In the middle of the battlefield, between the two warring sides, lay the young casualties of war. Just boys that had been cut down in the flower of their youths. Many were dead, already becoming stiff and pale, and the ones who were wounded were screaming. They screamed for help, screamed for their friends, screamed for their mommies to save them. But no one could save them while the battle still raged. Some of them were missing arms or legs, or had gaping bloody holes in their bodies in places where holes should never be. One of them even had a hole in his skull, resulting from a leaden musket ball that had cracked it open without killing him, and his gray brains were visible. Another was trying to hold his intestines inside of the gaping maw in his stomach. There is nothing glorious about war, thought Asa and every other kid there. As the sun began to set, the shots started to slow until nightfall brought an end to that day's fighting with an implied ceasefire. Both sides returned to their camps to eat and drink, and the medics tried in vain to heal the wounded. As the campfires crackled, the boys sat around in companies. Some boys wrote letters to their mothers, others smoked tobacco out of corncob pipes, and some began to tell ghost stories for entertainment. One of the older boys in Asa's company, a boy of maybe 17 years, had grown up right near the battlefield, and he began to tell them of a local legend. "When I was growing up here, my grandpappy used to tell us stories about the forest. One of them stories was about a creature that's been living here since before us, even before the Injuns, before man was here. Now, there's plenty of creatures out there, some good, some bad. Some of them are ghosts, some of them are wendigos, and some of them are the angry spirits of people who've died in violence." Several of them glanced out at the battlefield. They could still hear some of the last surviving boys screaming like babies. It was too dangerous to help them, so they were going to simply be left to die in agony. The boy continued. Grandpappy said there's one creature out there that's the worst of them all. He said there ain't no name for it. Even the Injuns ain't got a name for it. They feared it and avoided it since they thought giving it a name would give it power. Cherokee, Shawnee, Tootlo, Saponi, they all told tales of the demon. What kind of spirit, Jake? Asked a boy of about 12, whose voice had not even changed yet. A dark, dark spirit. Black. The blackest black you've ever seen. As the campfire's smoke curled up into the dark canopy of pine trees, the boys scooted a little closer to one another. Yep, blacker and black, Jake went on. It's bad, too. Wicked bad. Real evil, boys. 'Cause it don't just hate you. Don't just scare you. Now the Wendigo, it'll bite you and make you want to eat other people. But this one, the one without a name, it drinks your blood. It drinks it all down till you die from being drained of all your blood. The boys gasped. And that ain't it. When it drinks your blood, you die, but you come back. You come back like one of them, like the dark thing. And then you start craving the blood of other people. And you start killing them and making them like you until everyone in the village is a monster. It's so bad, so evil, that it can't go out in the day because the sun will burn it all up. It can't go near nothing Christian because it'll scare it away. It's like a dead person what's come back as a monster. Some of the younger boys had begun to turn their heads anxiously to look into the forest around them. Oh, that's just a legend, Jake, said Asa confidently. Jake answered, Well, Asa, maybe it is and maybe it ain't. You know the Injuns know this forest lots better than us, and they say it's true. But who knows? The group of boys puffed on their pipes in silence, pondering the tale that Jake had just told them. The pine forest around them was silent. Too silent. No animals scurried or called out. A scream came from the Confederate camp across the field. What was that? Asked Asa. Some poor bastard getting his leg amputated, I'll bet, said Jake. Another shriek sounded across the field, then another. That's lots of amputations, said one boy. Wait, said Asa. Hush, just listen. The screams increased until dozens of Confederate men were crying out in mortal terror. Soon, it sounded like the whole damn Confederate army was yelling for mercy, and then, in a matter of seconds, the screams ended. Something ain't right there, noted Jake. The trees around the Union camp began to shiver like there was a strong breeze, quivering in the way that only pine trees do, and the boys were looking around nervously like prairie dogs. Asa looked across the camp at another campfire, around which some other boys were sitting, and pangs of fear gripped his stomach as he saw a raven-black figure sweep between him and the fire. It was tall and seemed to hover inches off the ground as it passed back into the forest. Asa was not the only boy to notice, as several others in his company frantically looked around from campfire to campfire. The dark figures were everywhere at once, moving at impossible speeds. They began to pounce upon the soldiers, ripping them apart, pulling off heads, tearing chests open worse than any musket ball ever could. The screams of dread and pain were like those that had come from the Confederate side, each one cut short as one of the horrors killed some poor boy, then bent down to his neck and began audibly guzzling and slurping his blood. The gurgling blood was like a forest stream, but thick and viscous rather than sprite and bubbly. The entire encampment was being torn apart by the creatures, and Asa fainted from fear. He must have remained unconscious for an entire day, for when he came to, it was evening again, and he was in the same place. He could no longer move his tongue around his desiccated mouth, and his nostrils were on fire and bleeding. His neck was too stiff to even think of turning, and he ached with a sick hunger and thirst. Death seemed like the best option, and he would have chosen that were it not for the thought of his beloved mother waiting for him at home. She likely would receive news soon of the battle and the number of casualties, and if he did not return home, she would be heartbroken. The thought of that pained his heart and soul to a depth never before reached by any of life's troubles. He would have cried, but there was not enough liquid left in his husk. Moving was next to impossible, but he began by scratching his fingers in the dirt and then swaying his forearm slowly, then his upper arm, and then his other limbs, until he had broken the seal of stiffness. Over the course of 10 minutes, Asa suffered searing bursts of pain in his joints and muscles, but finally managed to bear a convincing resemblance to standing upright. Hobbling through the gory remains of the Union camp, he found some water and food rations. Asa turned in the direction of his home and began heading back. He walked through the night and into the morning, then into evening again. In a while, he began to see familiar surroundings on the road. He was about 1 hour's walk from his home, and that thought warmed him with great cheer, even though the night was falling fast. He limped, yet still picked up his pace, the heart warmth tugging at his heartstrings like real fleshy arms, warming his spirit so that even the bloody gashes and cuts about his body felt more like caresses. And he fantasized about the warm, savory flavors that he would enjoy that night. "Well, well, well, what do we have here, boys?" A youthful, twangy voice rang out from the side of the path, and before he had time to even register it, he saw 6 or 7 Confederates emerging from the brush, grinning like cats who had cornered their mouse. "Oh, hell," muttered Asa. "Boys, I think I see me a Yankee here. Ain't you a Yankee, man?" "I just want to get home," Asa pleaded. "Please, I was almost killed in the battle. Please just let me pass." "Please just let me pass," mocked the leader of the gang in an effeminate voice. "You're a Yankee." Asa remained silent, squinting his eyes in a desperate plea for mercy, when recognition swept across the leader's face. "Well, damn, boys, look at who we got here. If it ain't none other than one Asa McCoy." "That's a McCoy?" asked one of the boys incredulously. "McCoy, your clan's been our neighbors for years, and you went and turned against us in the war. Why would you do a thing like that?" Look, this war has us all messed up," begged Asa. "Now, boys, your family and mine's known each other for too long to let this war divide us like this. Every man makes his choices. And every man must live with the consequences," answered the leader, as he swaggered toward Asa with a pistol in his hand. "What do you say, boys? A little extrajudicial justice? We are at war, to be sure, and this one here's the enemy, ain't he?" The other Confederate boys laughed and nodded, one calling out, "Damn right, Lucius, and ain't we commanded to kill the enemy?" "That we are, Titus," answered Lucius, while cocking back the pistol's hammer. "Why, I reckon it'd be treason to let the enemy live." The boys chuckled again. "Finish him, Lucius. Think of all the boys he must have killed from our side," called out a boy in the back of the group. "Oh, no. Oh, please now, Lucius," begged Asa. "Please just let me go home. Consider it a favor for family to family. I got my poor mother waiting for me at home. Please don't kill me." Asa, exhausted to the point of shaking, fell to his knees in supplication, only causing the Confederates to laugh at him and Lucius to put the pistol to his temple. "Say goodbye to this world, McCoy. He who lives by the sword shall die by the—" Lucius's words were cut off by a black figure rushing out of the forest at the speed of a bullet. It tore Lucius's head off, then went and did the same to every one of his horrified companions before they could even scream in fear. Asa watched for a second time as the creature tore into their necks and slurped their blood. Too tired to move, he had no choice but to watch in a combination of fascination and disgust. After feeding, however, the creature turned toward him. It was like a person in its shape, but under a black cloak and hood that looked as if they were made out of the very night and the fabric of the universe. The face was invisible behind the blackness, save 2 glowing red dots that must have been the thing's eyes. Well, that sight was apparently enough to endow young Asa with superhuman strength, for he stood up and began to run away from the thing as if he were fresh from a good night's sleep. Lucky was he that, even in his state of panic and terror, he managed to run in the direction of his home, and once he came to that knowledge, he ran like the wind, adrenaline masking all of the battle wounds and agonies. He ran for a time that seemed like forever, but was, in reality, a couple of minutes, until the thick, dark forest surrounding him gave way to a faint yellow glow, a glow which expanded like the iris of an eye until he could see, through the trees, his homestead. Muttering thanks to God, Jesus, Buddha, Zoroaster, and any other deity he could think of, he burst out of the forest onto his very own property. God help him, he could see his mother through the parlor window sitting at a desk, writing a letter, perhaps to him? He slowed his run to a trot, catching his breath. He was in the clear, and only steps remained between himself and his home. Any pain and coldness in his body were instantly replaced with warm feelings of ecstasy and anticipation. To hug his mother, to taste hot, well-seasoned meat, to sleep in a soft, pillowy bed. These had been but fantasies a few days ago, but now they were being fulfilled. A noise, a shuffling of leaves, a clattering of branches. Poor Asa sensed and knew what it was before he turned to look. In this living world, the last thing he saw was that sickening pair of red eyes beneath the black hood and the dark shape rushing at him. Chapter 2. The Punks Break Down. West Virginia, modern day. "Stop spitting on the floor of my van, prick!" screamed Scary Mary Gambino over the blast of the Ramones' "I Want to Be Sedated." In return, Paul Junkroy spat again, the ruddy tobacco juice pooling into a nauseating glob on the driver's floor mat underneath his combat boots. "Shit! What kind of hick hillbilly punk chews tobacco anyway?" yelled Scary Mary. Paul spat a little more through the gap in his two front teeth and grinned. "We're in West fucking Virginia now, Mary. Yee-haw! Might as well be a hillbilly. Don't you want to fit in?" "You think we fit in anywhere?" asked Gutter Gil LeBlanc from the back seat of the trashed 1964 Volkswagen microbus, which was rusted, wobbly, and covered with punk band stickers. "Isn't that rather the point?" he continued in a baritone, affected half-British accent. "I swear, Paul, it's like you don't even understand the punk philosophy. We're anti-authoritarian, anti-conformity. Christ." He shook his head depressingly, while Paul just shrugged his shoulders. "Oh, for fuck's sake," replied Mary, acquiescing and cranking up the music even louder, if that were possible. The eardrum-puncturing, glass-shattering volume of the Ramones almost covered up the earth-shaking, contrabass snores of Muggy Matt Moulin, who was curled up in the back floor space, managing almost supernaturally to sleep peacefully despite the utter chaos in the van. Blitzkrieg Bop came on next, and Paul shouted out the chorus, replacing Blitzkrieg Bop with Hillbilly Ass. Mary furrowed her brows. "Oh my God, you're so stupid, Paul. Jesus." He sang louder and laughed maniacally. "And slow the fuck down. I don't have insurance on this van. If we get pulled over by some hick cop, they'll probably put us in jail." Paul pressed the accelerator and sped up. "Why do I even fucking try?" asked Mary. "The girl has a point," chimed in Gil. "You know the law enforcement in these small rural villages tend to be rather mistrusting of outsiders, much less a punk band from New Orleans. We are, doubtless, like aliens to them." "You're a fucking alien, bitch!" yelled Paul, bellowing with self-indulgent laughter. Gil just looked down and shook his head again. Matt, against all laws of nature, slept on. The narrow state highway they were on, flanked by an impenetrable wall of pine trees, rose and fell like waves as it passed over the Allegheny foothills. The tough little Volkswagen four-banger protested and whined with each rising crest, but with every slope, the cool fall wind passed over the angry cylinders and calmed them down. The little microbus only had so much life left in it, however, and at the peak of the next foothill, the engine cut out, also silencing the Ramones and waking up Matt, who promptly and unceremoniously asked, "Where the fuck are we? What the fuck's happening?" "Well, Matt," replied Mary, "it seems like Paul doesn't know how to drive a fucking van and now it broke down." "Me?" demanded Paul amidst a fit of giggling. "Shit, Mary, don't blame me because you can't maintain a fucking van." "Just pull over, Paul. Pull right over. I know something about engines. Stop yelling, too. I have a headache," added Gil. Paul shrugged, spat a big loogie, then pulled the steering wheel to the right, causing the van to silently coast farther than they would have imagined it could have, having no functioning engine. In fact, it coasted right into the dusty parking lot of the countryest country store that any of the four ridiculous city slickers had ever seen. The wooden building, perhaps shack was a better term, was dilapidated, or in the process of dilapidating. A rusted tin sign hung slanted, proudly presenting the text, "Ushaville General Store." A large, slatted wooden porch creaked rhythmically to the beat of splintery old rocking chairs, ensconced upon which were a sundry range of stereotypes. Some chewed tobacco, some picked the banjo, some played gin rummy, and some just stared out at the forest as if they were sedated. A missing tooth here, a patch of hair there. These old men might have been on the front of a demented postcard, "Missing you in West Virginia." As if enjoying the chaos, the microbus glided to a smooth, silent stop right in front of the store. A hubcap came loose and rolled up onto the porch. The banjo music ceased. For at least 2 excruciating, awkward, horrifying minutes of total silence, as if the forest creatures themselves were in awe of this mighty clash of cultures, the 4 rockers and the 4 locals stared at one another, each slightly terrified yet insanely curious. Mohawk to mullet, piercing to stubble, guitar to banjo, leather to flannel, the punk to hillbilly standoff was finally broken when a local sitting on a rocking chair offered, in a nervous and cracking voice, Can I help you, boys? Ladies and gents? Well, can I help you?" Gil rolled his eyes in exasperation and decided to answer for the group. Van broke down. Can I just use your parking lot for a little while? I have some tools. I think I can fix it. Well, the concept of working on engines in parking lots turned out to be the one uniting factor between the two groups. The man nodded, stood up, and walked toward the Volkswagen, stopping at the edge of the shadow created by the porch's awning. Welcome to Ushaville. I'm Red, and this is my store. We aim to be hospitable around here, so you just use our parking lot as long as you need, you hear? And if you're hungry or thirsty, we got barbecue and cold drinks inside the store. Got any beer? Shouted Paul from the driver's seat. Beer? It's not even noon, son. Paul nodded, laughed, and spat through his dental gap. Yeah, buddy, that's the point. Well, sure we got beer, answered Red. We sure do if you're given to drinking in the morning. Meet me inside and I'll check you out. Yee-haw, yelled Paul. You hear that, Matt? They got beer. Let's go, mate. Matt, eyes looking drowsy still, followed Paul into the store as Red took his tools to Gil timidly, wondering if this particular human species was apt to attack without provocation. He stared a little too long at Gil's nose piercing, prompting Gil to ask, You like it? I could give you one. I have a license. Red's eyes grew wide and he stammered, No, that's all right. Thank you, though. My nose will stay how the good Lord made it. Let's have a look at that engine. As Gil lifted the rear engine cover, Red seemed to realize his mistake in leaving the store unattended. He huffed and stammered, made some excuse, then ran toward the store, but it was too late. As soon as Paul and Matt had entered the store, they had begun stuffing cigarettes, chips, lighters, and sundry baubles into their boots, underwear, and jackets. As Red huffed his fat belly inside, the derelicts began examining the beer choices a bit too innocently. Got anything besides this watery crap? Yelled Paul across the store, as Red eyed them both suspiciously. Sorry, but it's all we got. We ain't got fancy stuff here. We managed to get along all the same. Yeah, all right, replied Paul. Matt, grab a few cases. I'll get some more. They plopped 6 cases of Natural Light onto the sales counter and whipped out a few crinkled, filthy, torn old $20 bills. Red rang them up, his lips pursed and eyebrows furrowed. He looked up at Paul. You're a tall feller. Paul grinned and spat on the floor. Red just continued to stare. You want to ask something, bud? Just ask. It's all right, said Matt. Red smiled weakly and answered, Well, I guess I was wondering what a group of, what are you, rock and rollers? Paul stifled a chuckle. What are you doing here in the middle of bumfuck nowhere? I was born here, that's my excuse, but can't be much for a group of young'uns here, can they? Young'uns? Jesus, muttered Paul under his breath. We're on our way to a gig. Red shook his head. A show? You know, we're playing a rock concert in Charleston. We're a band, the Gravediggers. This was supposed to be a shortcut, explained Matt. A shortcut? Hell, I'm not sure we're a shortcut to anywhere out here. We're plumb in the middle of a giant forest. Sorry to tell yous, but you're a hell of a long way from Charleston. What you want to do is get that there van of yours fixed up and head back the other way. Nothing for yuns in Ushaville, I promise you that. As Red gave them their change, he eyed their bulging jackets filled with stolen items and their torn jeans. Paul hissed at him like a goat, and Red jumped back. Thanks for the beer, man. A crowd of rednecks had gathered in the oak tree shade around Gil and the van, watching him turn the wrench here and there. He yelled, Shit! Causing the crowd of locals to jump back. Relax, guys. I'm harmless, mostly. I think we're screwed, though. The carb's dead. You got a car shop in town? By this time, Red, Paul, and Matt had returned outside. Red shook his head. I think yuns need to call someone to pick you up. We're just a tiny little settlement. Not much here to help you. The locals all stole furtive glances at one another. Not a single fucking person in your town has an auto shop? Demanded Paul. Look, son, I've been more than accommodating to you bunch. No need to talk to us like that, huffed Red. Paul, calm down, Christ, interjected Scary Mary. Sorry, Mr. Red, he's just an asshole. Look, we appreciate your help. The thing is, we're stuck. We don't know anyone in West Virginia. We're from New Orleans, and everyone we know is there. At the mention of the Crescent City, the locals seemed to pay more careful attention to Mary's words. New Orleans, you say? Asked Billy Mac McCoy, the banjoist. We know something about that city, he said, chuckling. That's enough, Billy, snapped Red. These folks don't want to hear your life story. They need to be getting along, though. It's getting close to noon. While ignoring Red, Paul was studying the store and squinting his eyes like he was trying to remember something. He looked the wooden shack up and down, then focused on the sign. Under the Ushaville General Store title were the words, Red McCoy, Owner. Then it clicked in his drunken mind. McCoy? Red McCoy? Like the Hatfield and McCoy feud? He asked loudly. Red frowned at him but replied, Yes, sir, that's us. Ushaville's the center of the area where the famous feud began. This side of town's us McCoys, and east side of town's all Hatfields. Oh shit, added Mary. Seriously? The Hatfield-McCoy feud? Holy crap, we really are in the boonies. Please, oh please tell me, Red, that the feud isn't still going on. Mary, Paul, Gil, and Matt watched Red in anticipation, hardly believing this. Red seemed a little embarrassed, but replied, Well, if you want the truth, then yes. Ushaville never really recovered. It's not like in Charleston where the whole thing's a tourist attraction. Here, bad blood spills into the next generation's veins. It's a matter of family honor. You'd have to be from here to understand. Mary lost it, doing a spit take with her beer. Well, holy hell, the Hatfield-McCoy feud continues, and we managed to find it. The band laughed heartily, but the rednecks did not seem too jovial about it. You wouldn't understand, yelled Joey McCoy. It's a long private history. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Easy, Joey, spoke Red. You Ford better watch your manners. It's you stuck out in the middle of nowhere with no help, not us. The euphemized threat dampened their laughter, and Gil stepped in to try to help. All right, Red, look. We're just some stupid punks from New Orleans. We don't mean harm, all right? I apologize on behalf of my idiot bandmates. It's been a long trip, and they're just slightly losing their minds, which were not too great to begin with. Please, there must be some place in your town to get our van fixed. It needs a new carburetor, or at least a rebuild. We're not rich, as you can see, but I can pay for at least that and a hotel room for the night. Please, Red, I'm sorry for our behavior. It goes with the lifestyle, but inside we're harmless. Speak for yourself, loser, yelled the drunken Paul, with a gratuitous spit of tobacco juice through his gap. Shut up for now, Paul. Seriously, we're in deep shit here, especially if you keep insulting these gentlemen. Now, Red, please be reasonable, pleaded Gil. Sorry, son, but there ain't nothing we can do for you. Ushaville's no place for strangers. You can sleep in your van, and tomorrow I'll take a look at the car myself. Might have a spare one, and if not, I can try to fix it. Now, Yuns is free to use the store bathroom in the parking lot. You can buy all you want from the store, but just don't cause trouble, got it? We're just peaceful folks here. Come on, Red, said Matt, now fully awake thanks to chugging 3 beers. There's gotta at least be a hotel here. I don't mind sleeping in the damn van, but we're stuck here forever without some help. Is it about your stupid feud? Is that why you won't help us? We don't care, man. None of our business, right? Just give us a place to sleep and a way to fix our van. Come tomorrow, you'll never see us again. I told yous, it just ain't. Red was interrupted by the loud hum of a motorcycle engine. A vintage Triumph Bonneville rounded the road's corner, then pulled into the parking lot. Turning off the engine and resting the bike on its kickstand, a man stepped off. Wearing black jeans, a black leather jacket, dark sunglasses, and a black scarf tied around his head, he must have been 7 feet tall or more. The opposite of a bodybuilder, he was wraith-thin, like an animated scarecrow, positively terrifying. All talk ceased, and a viscous silence enveloped everyone. No birds chirped, no breeze blew. Leaving his sunglasses on his face and exposing no skin, the wispy tall man surveyed the scene. In a controlled baritone voice, a voice that practiced meek subduction but hinted at a great force below, he said, Red McCoy, what is going on here? Red, removing his hat and looking down, answered in a trembling voice, Nothing, sir. Just, we have some visitors, sir. Visitors? The man looked toward the band. Paul whispered, Holy hell, he looks like Joey Ramone. Mary kicked his foot to shut him up. Where are you from, visitors, and how did you stumble upon Ushaville? The 4 were initially too intimidated to answer, but Gil decided to be the adult in the group of overgrown adolescents. We're from New Orleans. We're traveling to Charleston, and our van broke down right here at this store. The tall man took a few steps towards them, still wearing his dark sunglasses. He seemed to think for a moment, then said, And I assume that Red McCoy has shown you 4 strangers hospitality? He told us to bugger off, basically, interjected Paul from behind Gil. The man slowly turned and looked directly at Red, who, if he were not pissing his pants now, would surely crap them later. Is this so, Red McCoy? Strangers come into our town and you insult them? Is that how we have taught you to act? Red whimpered, But sir, I didn't want them to... That's enough, Red McCoy, interrupted the man calmly. and Red became ghostly silent. Forgive my friends, travelers. How often we forget the old ways of hospitality that our ancestors taught us in this town. You are most welcome to stay in our hotel. I will see that your van is repaired, and I will have you back on the road tomorrow. Until then, you are free to enjoy our town. Mickey McCoy, and he then nodded toward a rather rough-looking fellow in overalls on the porch, will drive you into town. All I ask is that you do not disturb the peace, and I also strongly urge you not to venture into the east side of the town. Welcome to Ushaville. In utter silence among them all, the willow of a man strode back to his Triumph in barely 2 steps, mounted it, and started the engine. The bike hummed a buzzing song. Nature returned to life. Without looking at the store again, he calmly rode back the way he had come. Chapter 3. Jean-Pierre de la Frenière. Father Jean-Pierre de la Frenière always became a bit nervous when the bishop showed up unannounced at the office of the St. Louis Cathedral in Jackson Square, New Orleans. It was not so much that Jean-Pierre worried that the bishop would chastise him for sipping wine during the day. After all, the bishop was a known inebriate, although it was certainly never spoken of in priestly circles. Jean-Pierre smoked cigars, too. Again, the bishop did not care. No, the individual trappings of hedonism did not move the bishop. Not much did. In his 80 years, he had seen enough priests of all types to simply stop caring. Did any particular priest fulfill his duties? Did he offer Mass, give the Eucharist, visit the sick? Did he help give to the poor? Was his doctrine sound enough to not arouse the sniffing around of the Vatican? Then that was a good priest, as far as the bishop was concerned. No, Father Jean-Pierre hated the bishop's sudden visits simply because he, though a priest, was losing his faith. It was more than that, in fact. He was slipping down, not only into the pits of agnosticism and, dare he even mumble the word, atheism, but even more so, into becoming overall pissed off at God and the church. Oh, Mother Church, who promises succor, then slaps her children in the face. What good was he a priest? Why did he even continue to live? To chant some Latin here and there? To give wine to those already drunk on delusion? To visit the sick with empty promises of prayer and healing, only to watch them wither and die anyway? Was he not merely a glorified public speaker with the ultimate bully pulpit? Jean-Pierre had recently been thinking often of his past. Though he was only 45 years old, he had lived a wealthy, wild, and profligate youth as the son of a very successful international merchant. His father, though often emotionally unavailable, had nonetheless shown Jean-Pierre the world. Then, when he himself had come of age and received his trust fund, he himself had traveled the world. After graduating Oxford, there were Paris, London, Berlin, Beijing, Manila, Lima, New York, Tokyo. He had played his fleshly folly in these and more, wanting for nothing, yet unfulfilled. Wine, women, song, and expensive baubles. These had seemed, at that time, to make him a sort of god. When he had grown bored with one situation, he had merely moved somewhere else. Of course, this lifestyle had made him the happiest man in the world for a decade or so. Then, as with most young men who live in that manner, he had become his own Faust, overly educated but miserable, a bacchanalian in ennui. One night, in a drunken and drug-addled stupor, he had somehow found a Bible and had thumbed through it. A few parables later, and he had seen a light burst forth from the ceiling, and a voice booming out claiming to be God, telling him to become a Catholic priest. The experience had seemed quite real to him, though his mother, a fundamentalist Protestant, had insisted that it was merely an effect of the drugs and booze. Against her warnings, he had joined the seminary and had never looked back. He had replaced his wild life with a life of piety and faith, and had quickly become a rising star among priests. His sermons had tugged at the heartstrings, and his care for the poor and suffering had been legendary. That had lasted for a decade. He had shared with his confessor, Father Martin Peter, who was also a close personal friend, about his loss of faith. The priest had tried several times to provoke Jean-Pierre into revealing the event or moment that had changed his faith for the worse. Still, Jean-Pierre had remained coy, only indicating that he had witnessed something on a mission trip to Colombia, something so terrible that it had forced him to reassess his faith, not only in a good and loving God, but in any God at all. Maybe I'll tell you about what happened down in Bogota one day, Martin. Right now I need to try to cling to the last hanging rope of faith of the church that I can find, he had told Father Peter. And Father Peter, being wise beyond his years, had let it rest at that. That had left Father Jean-Pierre de la Frenière in a state of tension when performing his priestly duties, wanting to do them with enthusiasm and genuine faith, but being tormented by that seed of doubt that had been planted by the unspeakable thing that he had seen in Bogota. So Jean-Pierre despised the bishop's visits precisely because the tension under which he lived could not go on forever. Rubber bands eventually tear. Bubbles pop. Smoke dissipates. It was only a matter of time before Jean-Pierre tore as well, and each visit by the bishop served only to remind him that he was living on the clock. Each doctrinal discussion saddened him. A brilliant hermeneuticist, did he even matter without faith? So, when the bishop and Father Peter knocked on his office door one atypically cold, foggy morning in January, Father Jean-Pierre simply released a defeated sigh and opened it. The two visitors smiled and stepped inside the admittedly richly appointed office. Oaken panels for walls, exotic rugs for flooring, and a library to make the Vatican envious. Jean-Pierre enjoyed his scholarly time. He offered seats and hot tea to the two. "Jean-Pierre," said the bishop, "I do hope we are not inconveniencing you. I was in the area and thought that Father Peter and I would spend the afternoon in the quarter. Naturally, we could not do so without visiting you. I trust things have been well." "Well enough, Bishop. Nothing new or sudden, as you might imagine." "Father Peter was telling me," continued the bishop, "about the recent spate of murders here in the French Quarter. As you might know, I've been in Rome for the past couple of months, so this is news to me. Terrible, isn't it?" Jean-Pierre had almost forgotten about the killings that he had read about in the Times-Picayune. So far, there had been 3 within a period of a few months. In each case, a body had been found decapitated in some narrow alley or another, but exsanguination had been the principal cause of death. His mind had been so self-absorbed, so attendant to his crisis of faith, that he realized he had been selfish in ignoring the outside world. After all, hadn't serving others been one of his primary joys in the priesthood? Had he grown so callous as to ignore murder? "It is, Bishop. Apparently there were very violent murders, too. Can it be anything but a serial killer?" Father Peter frowned and furrowed his brows. He knew Jean-Pierre well enough to sense the doubt in his voice. The bishop remained oblivious. "I suppose so. Such evil in this world, fathers. Such evil. We need God's grace more than ever. Please, stay safe, Father Jean-Pierre." "You know how the quarter can get at night," advised the bishop. "It's almost like Victorian London with Jack the Ripper around." "A sobering thought, Bishop," exclaimed Father Peter. "Jean-Pierre is a homebody anyway. It's hard to find him away from his books on any given night." Jean-Pierre chuckled. "Well, that's true. In any case, Bishop, I have the statistics you were asking about." They conducted their business, and the bishop left the two priests and friends alone. The rosy sun began its nightly descent, and like every night, the French Quarter started to metamorphosize from its loud, gaudy, colorful, touristy day persona into its true self. Dark, cloistered, daring, dangerous, mysterious. People began walking the streets and alleys. They filled the myriad bars and restaurants, the clinking of glasses mingling with the chinking of silverware and the buzzing murmur and sibilation of conversation. "What's new, Jean-Pierre?" asked Father Peter. "We haven't spoken in a couple of weeks." Jean-Pierre produced a bottle of 16-year-old Lagavulin, poured them each a finger's dram, and sat back pensively. "Off the record, Martin, I've fallen down the rabbit hole of doubt. I'm still struggling against the waves, though. I'm just not sure what I need to either push me under into agnosticism or lift me back up into my belief. Sometimes God knows. Sometimes we're swallowed by a whale and taken under. Remember, though, that Jonah came back," offered Father Peter. "Why does it have to be through the whale's body, Martin? Why can't God just give me a clear sign, a message? Why won't he just show me that it's all real, that there's an ultimate point to it all? Take these murder victims. What was the point? What lesson or message could God possibly have wanted to give to anyone? Just for once, how about a good, positive, clear message? Because, without the belly of the whale, my friend, we are never truly stripped down to our bare essence. Without the struggle, we never become authentic. We never tear away the mask and crawl before God naked and hopeless. It's really the only way that he can lift us back up," replied Father Peter. The two men sat in silence for a few minutes, in the silence that only two true friends can endure without wriggling in uncomfortable anticipation and awkwardness. "What happened in Colombia, Jean-Pierre?" asked Father Peter softly. "Why do you ask right now?" Call it a hunch, but I've long sensed that whatever horrible thing you saw that night was the seed that was planted that is growing into the flowers of doubt. Something must have happened that made you question everything you thought you knew about the world, about God." "You're not wrong, Martin," admitted Jean-Pierre. "One day I'll tell you what I witnessed." "How about next confession?" Jean-Pierre considered this and replied, "Possibly, Martin, possibly. Suppose I have to talk about it eventually." "It will only help you with your crisis of faith, you know." Jean-Pierre nodded. They finished their scotch, chatted a bit, and then Jean-Pierre walked Father Peter to his car and saw him off. Re-entering his office, the priest poured himself another rather stiff glass of Lagavulin. He pulled out a volume of the writings of St. Jerome, hoping for some guidance from the ancient. The first line he saw read, "When the stomach is full, it is easy to talk of fasting." Jean-Pierre laughed and read on into the night. Around midnight, as the tickling fingers of sleep were about to gently pull his eyelids closed, a piercing shriek from Pirate's Alley right next to his office broke the still of the night. Jumping hurriedly out of his leather reading chair, he peeked through the peephole in the study door that led to the alley. He spied a woman lying on the ground unmoving. After calling the police, he hesitantly opened the door. Cautious, he looked around to make sure no one else was near, then knelt next to the woman. He tried to feel for a pulse, but as soon as he touched her neck area, her head rolled off her body. He gasped and said a quick prayer for her soul. Noticeably absent was the pool of blood, which surely should have accompanied such a violent act. The police arrived quickly, took a statement from Jean-Pierre, and went about removing the body and processing the crime scene. "Father, I'm Detective Pace Barillo, NOPD," said a short, rotund, and haggard man of a certain age. He looked like he had a troubled and long-distance relationship with his bed. Let's go over what happened again." Jean-Pierre repeated his account, then asked, "It's the serial killer again, isn't it, Detective?" "Well, it certainly looks like the other cases, but we have to investigate it first to make a conclusion. Did you notice anything in particular really strange about this crime scene?" "Yes, Detective, there's no blood. How's that even possible?" "Weird as hell, Father, isn't it? Like the other ones. This guy seems like some sort of weirdo into blood rituals or something. You know anything about Satanists in the area?" "I know that there are many young people around here," answered Jean-Pierre, "who like to seem edgy and dark and claim to practice something like Satanism, but it's mostly just a lifestyle, not the real thing." "But you know, Father, that we have lots of people into voodoo, hoodoo, Santeria in New Orleans," added Barillo. "We do," admitted Jean-Pierre, "but those are just religions. It's mostly a myth that they do anything even close to this. The most blood you might see in those ceremonies is from a chicken." The detective jotted down some notes and nodded. "Well, thanks for the info, Father. I'll be in touch if I need anything else." "Any time, Detective. Should I be worried? This happened right outside my office. It's very disturbing, as you can imagine." All right. We'll put a uniform to patrol around the church for a few days. Good enough?" "Thanks, Detective." Pensive, Jean-Pierre sat back in his chair after the police left and looked at the clock. It was already 2 a.m, but how could he sleep after such horror? He leaned back comfortably into the plush cushions and closed his eyes. He could not shake the vision of that poor woman's head rolling off. Such violence, such aggression, such needless terror. That sort of murder was neither random nor impulsive. It was the work of a monster, of a man who had a goal and a fantasy. A flash of memory sliced into his mind in an instant. A sweaty jungle, dark nightfall, a small village, lit torches, confusion, fear. There is a girl on the ground, maybe 14 years old. She is filthy, bloody, smeared in her own vomit. Her clothes are almost completely ripped off. Standing above her is another priest. Jean-Pierre hears the priest's forceful baritone voice. Latin. Rites. It is an exorcism. The girl writhes and wails. Every couple of minutes her voice is replaced by a guttural, grating, animalistic growl. It is too deep and loud and amplified to be proceeding from her little teenage lungs and throat. She is tied down on a bamboo mat. The priest's brave voice continues without success. Jean-Pierre can hear little sprinkles of fear and doubt entering into his cadence, and soon he sounds exhausted and weak. The demon laughs at the other priest, then turns toward Jean-Pierre. Vamos, padre. No lo quieres intentar. Jean-Pierre ignores it and continues to pray along with the exorcist. Nothing is working. The girl growls and breaks through her fetters. She leaps up with superhuman speed upon the exorcist and knocks him to the ground. Among his high-pitched shrieks and pleas, she bites into his throat and rips out his larynx. She guzzles his blood as Jean-Pierre watches, too paralyzed by fear and terror to move. The people of the village scream and cry, but they can do nothing. From among the crowd steps a man. He is not from the village and is dressed like someone from the city, from Bogota. He carefully but fearlessly grabs the girl's shoulders and turns her over. He has a sharpened wooden stick in his hand, and the girl sees it. For the first time, her mocking, demonic face shows fear. The man plunges the stick into her chest, into her heart. Her eyes grow wide and her mouth is agape. She falls to the ground and her flesh disintegrates, leaving only her bones, which then blacken and wither. There is total silence in the village. Jean-Pierre jumped back into the present. Since the incident, he had never remembered or envisioned the entire thing. Yes, he had twisted in his sweaty sheets in the night with dreamy flashes of blood here or screams there. This, however, was the first time that he had relived the entire experience. Now he remembered. He remembered the entire wicked ordeal. He lay back again in his chair and began to fall asleep, trying to suck energy from the remaining few early morning hours. As he drifted into a troubled, dreamless sleep, he remembered the words of the man from Bogota who had killed the girl. Father, this kind does not respond to exorcism. It is not a possession. It is another creature entirely, and the only way to stop it is to kill it. When Jean-Pierre woke the next morning, he immediately called Father Martin Peter. Martin, I remembered everything. God, it was terrible. I need a confession. Come over, Jean-Pierre. We can do it now. Chapter 4. Professor Miller's Move. Well, it's much cheaper for one, and it's actually a quaint little town, sort of an old-world feel, which really surprised me. Professor Sager Miller, a specialist in the Maya civilization at the University in Glenville, was on the phone with his colleague and girlfriend, research assistant Xiaoqing Yan. I know, but it's really not that far from the university if you take the interstate as far as you can. Then there's this old highway, but traffic is light, so you can speed. What? Oh, maybe an hour from campus tops. I mean, I drove farther than that at my last job. Definitely. I should finish moving and arranging everything by tomorrow. I'll see what sort of groceries I can find here, then cook dinner for us. Hopefully they'll have a wine shop too. Okay, yeah. Bye. One benefit of being a rather renowned scholar in a rather limited field at a rather small and rural university was the luxuries the university afforded him when possible, such as movers to move all of his belongings so that he did not have to lift a finger. The small but attractive row house he had chosen was on a lovely little cobblestoned lane just off the town's main street. One thing that had attracted Sager to Ushaville was the distinctly European style of its design, which seemed rare in West Virginia. Lining the main street were rows of brick buildings with shops on the lower floor and living quarters above, with rather delicate details. A tower room here, a gargoyle there, a carved flourish here, an elegant dormer window there. It was as if the founders of this little town had arrived directly from Europe, and with money at that. The entire Appalachian area had, in fact, been settled by the Scottish people, but most of them had been poor. Ushaville must have been a special case, and Sager determined to read through its history when he found the time. After all, such a charming little town surely had a museum or historical society. The movers finished in the afternoon, so Sager tipped them and then decided to walk around the town. Unlike so many American towns that were built after the invention of the automobile and thus are not suitable for pedestrians, Ushaville was older. It had been set up in a distinctly compact manner to facilitate walking. He strolled along his tree-lined lane and then onto the main street, named Unter den Linden Street. Sager was surprised at reading something in German, and decided that wealthy German settlers must have founded the town. It would explain the name, the architectural style, and the general cleanliness and order to the layout. The street was populated with pedestrians of all sorts. Still, Sager immediately noticed what felt so uncanny about them. Many wore black or dark gray clothing, walked with their heads mostly down, and generally gave an affect of being a bit withdrawn. So sharp was the contrast between the cheery, comforting European-style buildings and the grim people that it was almost comical. Once in a while, a person or two would walk by with a more normal appearance, but they were few overall. That being so, the town was replete with businesses, restaurants, cafes, and even bars. As Sager strolled, he noted that one particular building stood out from the rest. It was not hard to spot the Fairy Realm Cafe, as its bright, almost Caribbean colors and hanging trinkets and baubles seemed to clash with the more conservative and darker colors found on the surrounding buildings. Inside, it was indeed like a fairyland. The booths were made from large tree trunks that formed seats then continued upwards, twirling into the ceiling. Colors on the walls whirled and merged into dreamy patterns, and little twists and nooks and corners gave the impression of a never-ending space. The central bar was an oval island in the middle of the cafe, and above it hung multicolored lights, colorful pieces of glass, and other such decorations that reflected rainbows all around the room. The walls were all covered with various knickknacks, as well as little paintings and sketches of fairies. More than the interior design, the atmosphere itself emanated a feeling of warmth, safety, and lulling contentment, almost a drunkenness, a palpable effect that was entirely unexpected and striking. Sager wanted to stay there forever, to explore its little spaces and read every book in its wall library, to drink every creation it served. In a word, the cafe was enamoring in its entirety. He approached to the center bar to see their menu, and a girl stood up as if she had been doing work below. "Hi, welcome to the Fairy Realm. What can I get for you today?" She was tall and thin but shapely, with hair so blonde that it almost seemed snow white. Her face was beautifully chiseled into defined angles and planes, but not so much that it was sharp. Her eyes were deep blue like a lake in Switzerland, and when she smiled, Sager felt himself become relaxed, warm, and happy. It was not so much that he was attracted to her beauty personally, but simply that such a beautiful creature existed. Did she even have the right to be in this ugly world, so lovely as she was? He stammered something, and she simply smiled and replied, "You look like someone who can appreciate a very fine Chinese tea. Have you ever had a pu'er tea from Yunnan province?" Composing himself, he said, "How did you know that I like tea? Pu'er is my favorite." "Oh, I just felt it," she answered. "We have some very high-grade aged pu'er. Please have a seat somewhere and I'll take it to you." She smiled again and turned away to begin working on his tea. He felt euphoric and dreamy at the same time, and it was as if he had floated to a table and wafted down into the comfortable, plush chair like a leaf delicately falling from a tree, swinging lightly from side to side like a gentle pendulum. A couple of minutes later, the girl brought his tea over. "My name's Titania. You can just call me over if you would like anything else. Enjoy." She half smiled knowingly, as if she held some secret about him that even he did not know, then spun around like a ballet dancer and drifted, back to the central bar. Liking this cafe immensely, Sager relaxed and thought that he had made a good choice of a town to live in. Aside from the weird attitude of many of the people, it was generally a lovely and quaint place. Perhaps he had misread the people? Maybe it was a local cultural feature. After all, he was originally from New Orleans, and people there tended to be very relaxed, happy, talkative, and often drunk. I should give them another chance, he thought. Titania is delightful after all. He sipped his tea and savored the rich, earthy, subtle flavors. A bit of a connoisseur of Chinese tea, Sager could tell that it was of very high quality. As if reading his mind, Titania said, "Don't worry, it's not too expensive." He chuckled. He heard the chime of the bell above the entrance door to the cafe, so he casually looked up, gasped, and stared. A girl was walking inside, and she was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. He felt enchanted by the stark, almost unnatural contrast between her black hair and pale skin. hair that was so raven that it nearly bled into a funerary purple, and such delicate blanched skin that she appeared to be a geisha doll, created artificially for the pleasure of others rather than as her own sentient being. It was as if Sager were staring directly into one of the wondrous mysteries of the universe, so jarring was this contrast. She appeared to be Asian, or maybe not. Her almond eyes melted downward onto her wide cheeks, and her tiny convex nose tilted outward at the slightest upward angle. He quickly glanced away, but he could feel his face flush with blood. Titania looked at him and winked, humiliating him even more. There was a free table near Sager's, and the mysterious girl sat there facing him. She ordered coffee and happened to meet Sager's eyes. Smiling with only one side of her lips only added to her dark mystique. Sager felt his stomach flip and tingle. He looked down and pretended to be reading the magazine that he had found on the table, but in no time he peripherally saw the girl stand up and glide to where he was sitting. He felt the blood rush to his face and feared looking up, just as when he had been a child, afraid to look under his bed for fear of what might have been there. "Professor Miller?" Sager's mouth and eyes opened wide. Hi. Sorry, do I know you?" "Not well, Professor. I've seen you on campus." She looked only about 14 years old now that he had a closer look. "A student?" "I'm Ophelia." She held out her hand, and as he took it, his entire body tingled. Her hand felt cool, and the tingling was replaced by some sort of small revulsion, some sort of primal warning from his reptilian brain, a warning that lasted only a fraction of a second. She looked at his hand, and he realized that he had been holding hers too long for social propriety. Sorry, he muttered. "I was just wondering, you look so young to be a university student." "I am," she replied. "I'm still in high school, but my mother works at the university as a secretary in the mathematics department. Sometimes I go to visit her, and I see you walking across the quadrangle." She half smiled again. I see. I thought you looked a little young, but then I thought maybe you were a genius." She allowed a subdued laugh to pass her lips, and Sager felt stupid. So you and your mom live here in Ushaville, I guess?" "Yes. Our family has been here for many years." "You are an expert on pre-Columbian Mesoamerican cultures, right?" she prodded. "Well, that's my field. Some might argue about whether I'm any sort of expert," he replied and chuckled. "I've read your papers. Your theories are really accurate." "Oh, you're interested in that field? That's great. If you do decide to go to the university, let me know. I can help get you into the department and get you prepared in advance. We don't have too many students interested in our field, so I love to meet any young people who are interested in it." "Thank you, Professor. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Ushaville," she said. She picked up her coffee and exited the cafe. Sager suddenly felt very guilty about the entire situation. First, he had a girlfriend, and although he could not help that other women were also beautiful, he should not have reacted so instinctively and passionately about merely seeing Ophelia. Second, she was a teenager, and while Sager was not old by any means, he felt terrible about having thought a girl that young was so attractive. He heard a commotion outside and turned to look out of the blue-tinted window. Across the street was a small hotel, and in front of it stood 4 people loudly arguing, 3 young men and 1 young woman. They wore black mesh, black makeup, piercings, chains, mohawks, and various other punk accoutrements. The tall, thin one waved his arms and pointed at the cafe, while the girl stood with her arms folded and pouting. The other 2 guys seemed bored and uninterested. One yawned. "What the—" muttered Sager as the group of punk rockers walked across the street, ignoring traffic and almost causing an accident, and entered the fairy realm. The tall, skinny one spoke out first. "Oi! Anyone here?" Titania sprung up from behind the counter, saw the group, and tried to contain a smirk. "Welcome to the fairy realm. You look like you could all use some coffee." "Black," said the tall, skinny one. "Cream and sugar," added the girl. "Whatever, doesn't matter," said the one with the sleepy face and yawned again. "Latte, 180 degrees with steamed almond milk, please," said the last of the 4, and the other 3 looked at him incredulously. "What? I like my coffee, all right." Sager watched the group with great amusement instead of fear. He had seen his share of oddballs and weirdos in New Orleans, so this look was nothing new. Perhaps it was more the contrast between the outrageous, outlandish group and the otherwise quiet and reserved nature of the townspeople. They chose a table and sat, the skinny one choosing to sit with his chair backwards, the back between his legs. Titania arrived with her orders. "Say, love," began the skinny one, "we're stuck in your town for a day or two while our van gets fixed." My van, Paul Junk," corrected the girl. Yeah, Scary Mary, your van. Anyway, where's a good bar? Where can we get a good beer around here?" Titania pursed her lips and thought for a moment. "Well, your hotel's on the west side of town, so you'll want to check out the Pallid Horse. It's really unique, like no place you've ever drunk in, I'm sure." "You're a peach, darling," replied Paul, who then took a gulp of his coffee. "Damn, that's good coffee. Well fucking done." "Paul," chided Mary, "this is a nice place. Don't act like an animal." "Animal is as animal does, baby," retorted Paul, and Mary tilted her brows, trying to understand what the hell he meant. "Yeah," said the sleepy one to Titania. "What's with this east and west thing in this town? Why does everyone say not to cross sides?" Titania bit her lip, paused, and replied, "Let's just say that this is a very old town with many families who have been here for a very long time. Not everyone gets along very well, and the town is sort of split into the east side and the west side." "You mean that hillbilly Hatfield and McCoy feud?" asked Paul with a smirk. "Well, that's part of it, but it's more complicated. You know how small towns are. Too many people know everyone else. This cafe is actually in the very center of town. It's the one place that people from each side come and sort of ignore one another in an implied truce." "Weird," said Mary, and the four sipped their coffee and ordered a second round. Let's take a little pause now. Leave Paul, Mary, Gil, and Matt to have a little break from their adventures and their horror. Go get a drink, use the bathroom, whatever you might need. I'm going to take a little intermission here, just a few seconds, and then we'll get right back into the book. Chapter 5. Beast Stalker. Waking up the next morning, Sager remembered only flashes and incoherent scenes from his dreams. Titania, Ophelia, the punks, coffee, and some disturbing reference to blood. These were all he could see in his mind, but he could not piece them together into a dream story. He decided to take another walk around Usheville, remembering his dinner date with Xia. As he strolled farther down Unter den Linden Street, he almost could not believe his luck. This supposedly small, rural town offered boutiques, gourmet food shops, wine shops, and bookstores. How could this be in West Virginia? How had he never heard of this town before? Shouldn't it have been well known? He felt like he was back in Europe on holiday. He relished all of the luxurious possibilities available as he strolled and created a dinner menu in his mind. He had already passed the Fairy Realm Cafe, and since the main street divided the town vertically and not horizontally, he did not have to worry about crossing into the forbidden east side, although, knowing his innate anti-authoritarian streak, he knew he would eventually go just to see. A bookstore caused him to stop. Unlike the other buildings, which were neat row houses and shops done in a classical European brick style, this bookstore was made of wood. In fact, it was inside of the now finished and polished remains of a giant tree. This ancient arbor had surely been there longer than Usheville itself. He stepped inside and was welcomed with the luscious scent of incense. The decor emphasized natural wood, plants, and soft earth tones. Rows and rows of books extended deep into the heart of the aged tree, and relaxing music subtly played in the background. Behind the solid wooden sales counter stood a tall, solid man. His olive skin accented his almond eyes, and his long, straight raven hair almost enshrouded his face. He wore traditional Cherokee clothing, and Sager was positive the guy was a Native American. "Hello," spoke the man in a slow, deep, soothing voice. "Welcome to the Old Ways bookstore in Usheville Museum." His voice sounded like the water in a meandering river. "Oh, thanks," replied Sager. "This store is amazing. So beautiful." The man only nodded. "What sort of books do you sell?" "We have a variety, but I like to focus on the history and culture of the area. There's a small museum in the back, too. It has some artifacts from the people who lived here in the old times. You know, my people." Sager nodded. "Cherokee?" "Very good," answered the man with a small smile. "How did you know?" "Oh, well, you could say that it's a bit of an interest of mine." The man nodded, seeming pleased. "You can call me Beast Stalker. It's my Indian name." Nice to meet you, Beast Stalker. I'm Sager Miller. Beast Stalker slightly raised his eyebrows and said, Not the Professor Sager Miller, expert on the pre-Columbian Americans. Well, said Sager while blushing a bit, I wouldn't say that. It's just my field of interest. I've read your books. For the first time, Beast Stalker sounded excited. You really understand the culture of my people. You understand the importance of our connection to land and nature. How did you come to be in my bookstore? Oh, that's nice of you to say. Well, I teach at the university in Glenville, and I was able to find a house here that is larger and nicer than the one I had there, but also cheaper. This is quite a remarkable town, you know. Beast Stalker allowed a minuscule, almost undetectable smirk to rise to his lips, then returned to his stone face. That is one way to say it. Ushaville is unique in many ways. There has been human settlement here for 20,000 years, maybe more. We have evidence, as well as the oral traditions of my people. Before my people came up from the caves under the earth, there was the dream time, a time of the Great Spirit, the Elder Spirits, and the Old Ones. And, well, you know what happened when the Europeans arrived. Sager rubbed the back of his neck and looked down awkwardly. I'm just messing with you, said Beast Stalker. Sometimes it's fun to make white people wince. Sager laughed heartily. You got me. I think you might enjoy the museum, Professor. Admission is free for you. You are the only one here right now, so come on, I'll show you. He led Sager to the back of the store, where a giant knot in the tree acted as a passageway to a back room. The museum was small, but the walls and floor space were crowded with interesting exhibits. Look around a bit, and then I'll show you some special items that might interest you, offered Beast Stalker. Sager perused remarkably well-preserved pottery, clothing, weapons, and more, dating from various times in the history of the Americas. These are some really nice Paleo-Indian pieces, exclaimed Sager. I thought you might enjoy them. Come over here and look at this item. Beast Stalker produced a large, sapphire amulet with writing that spiraled around it from top to bottom. Whoa! Sapphire? That must be worth a mint, exclaimed Sager. How safe is it to keep here in your bookstore? In dollars, it is very valuable, explained Beast Stalker. But as an ancient artifact of my people, it is priceless. As for its safekeeping, well, I will just say that I have a robust security system here. You can hold it and take a look. Sager took the enormous jewel into his slightly shaking hands and looked into it. The brilliant sparkles of 1,000 universes danced inside of it as it reflected the lights, and it seemed almost to have a liquid core, so pure was it. There were no inclusions. He looked at the writing and frowned. Where did your people find this? Asked Sager. Well, the story from local elders is that a great warrior chief of old, named Gikadanegiski, received this amulet from people from a distant land. These people came upon the waters from afar and taught things to our people. Of course, this legend is local to us, and not necessarily to other Cherokees around the country. But this language, argued Sager, it's like no language I've ever seen. I have a fairly broad understanding of linguistics and world languages, but this does not seem to fit into... No, that's impossible. Do you know the language, Professor? No one yet has been able to identify or decipher it, said Beast Stalker while raising his eyebrows. No, I don't know it myself. I mean, it slightly resembles... No, I'm mistaken. I tell you what, Beast Stalker, I have a good friend down in New Orleans. We were childhood friends, and we've kept up all this time. He's a Catholic priest, and he is truly an expert in languages. He's probably fluent in more than 20 of them, but one of his specialties is ancient languages. I myself, for example, know Mayan, but he knows many more. Perhaps you would allow me to take pictures from the amulet and send them to him? Yes, if only you promise that no one else will see those pictures. Beast Stalker looked Sager in the eyes. I promise, agreed Sager. He snapped a few photos with his phone. Beast Stalker nodded. Would you like to browse my books? I'd love to, but I need to do some grocery shopping. Any recommendations? Asked Sager. 4 buildings down. The Ushaville Market. They have everything, and very fresh produce. They also have a nice wine selection, if you are into that. Perfect, thanks. Well, it was truly a pleasure to meet you, Beast Stalker. I will definitely be back with the reply from my priest friend and also just to browse. This place is really amazing. Beast Stalker smiled and nodded. After Sager found everything he needed in the Ushaville Market, He headed home and called Xiaoqing, who agreed to arrive early that evening. With a classical Asian face, wide cheekbones, straight black hair, and thin frame, she was beautiful. What attracted Sager to her, however, was her mind. In typical Chinese style, she was very practical, but also very creatively intelligent. She used her practical nature to solve most problems, even those of an intellectual nature, by inventing creative solutions that often did not fit the mold. The couple enjoyed a dinner of roast pheasant, braised leeks, and roasted tomatoes, all accompanied by a rather indulgent bottle of Chateau Margaux. Sager had winced at the $200 price tag, but he was so content with his decision to move, with his relationship, with his career, and with his life overall, that he felt it warranted one bit of decadence. Xiaoqing had scolded him for it, but she did not seem to mind sipping it with him. As they were sitting on the sofa talking after dinner, with the documentary streaming on the iPad as background noise, 3 solid knocks hit the door. "Who could that be?" asked Xiaoqing. "It's already 9 o'clock. Sager peeped through the hole, turned back to look at Xiaoqing with his eyebrows raised quizzically, then slowly opened the door an inch, with the chain still attached. Outside stood a towering wraith of a man dressed in all black, with long black hair that fell from under a black fedora, and who wore sunglasses, which he removed when the door was opened. Yes, may I help you?" asked Sager. He felt a tiny, bitter seed of fear in his stomach's innermost parts, not unsimilar to what he had felt when he had touched Ophelia's hand. "Professor Miller, I do apologize for disturbing you so late. I'm Lorman McCoy, the mayor of Usheville. I heard that you had moved in, and I just wanted to extend a welcome to our town." "Mayor? Oh, well, that's very kind. Would you like to—" "No, thank you. I must be on my way. I hope you will enjoy your life here. Please feel free to explore, but I should advise you to be careful when crossing into the east side. It's an area with some crime problems. We're in the process of rejuvenating it and making it safer. The west side, on the other hand, has much to offer. Welcome, and please do not hesitate to contact me with any problems or concerns. My office is in the City Hall building on Unter den Linden, our main street, which I believe you found today." He nodded, tipped his hat, replaced his sunglasses, and turned and walked away. "Well, that was a little odd," said Xiaoqing. "Yeah, it sort of was," agreed Sager. "I mean, didn't he sound a little threatening, or at least controlling?" she asked. "That's it. That's what I felt. And did you see him? He must be over 7 feet tall and so thin. In a way, he kind of looks like Joey Ramone." Xiaoqing rolled her eyes. Sager laughed, picked her up, and carried her into the bedroom. The next day, Sager picked up the phone. "Hello? Sager, hey, it's Jean-Pierre." "Hey, man, how have you been? Sorry I haven't called for a week or two. I moved to another town like I told you." "How's the new place?" asked the priest. "Surprisingly great. It's like a little European city in the middle of West Virginia. I really can't believe my luck. You ever heard of Usheville?" "Never," answered Jean-Pierre. "Yeah, me neither, which is odd. How could a town like this not be known and flooded with tourists? That part's really weird. Anyway, you should come visit when you have a chance, Padre." "That's why I called," replied Jean-Pierre. "I got those pics you emailed me. Are you sure it's authentic, first of all?" "Well, all I know is that it's real sapphire. Remember that internship I did one summer with the gemologist Holly? I learned a lot about gems, and I can spot a fake sapphire pretty well. The size, too. This thing must be priceless. So I figure if it's real sapphire, then the chances are high that it's authentic otherwise." "Amazing. Sager, here's the thing. I might be wrong about this, but language on it is really out of place in North America. In fact, if my hunch is right, this could be one of the great archaeological discoveries of the ages. I was hoping I could pay you a visit and see it in person." "The curator is a Cherokee guy named Beefstalker. He seems nice enough. I bet he'd let you examine it if it led to deciphering," said Sager. "Well, I'm due some vacation time, and I need a break from this place. You up for a few days' visit?" "Buddy, I always have a spare room for my old friend. You can drive here from New Orleans in about 14 hours. You might want to break it up into 2 days. Maybe stop on the way, check out Atlanta. The weekend's coming up, and I'm still on break from the uni." "All right, man. See you in a couple of days. Email me directions. I'm not seeing this town on Google Maps. Weird. Well, I'll call you from Atlanta." "Sounds great, Padre. Looking forward to it." "And you can meet my new-ish girlfriend," said Sager. "Ah, a new girl. Sounds exciting. See you soon, buddy. Sager hung up and decided to take another look at the photos of the amulet that he had on his laptop. Chapter 6. The Punks Go Eastward. "That's the Pallid Horse Bar? Fucking great!" yelled Paul Junk Roy, and the other three gravediggers stared with their mouths agape. "Right on for once, Junk," replied Gutter Gil LeBlanc. The band looked at the edifice of the bar in punk amazement. It had obviously once been someone's home, wedged in among the brick row buildings like a splinter under a prisoner of war's fingernail. Built of wood rather than stone, it had been designed in the style of a New Orleans Garden District mansion, complete with verandas, columns, terraces, dormer windows, gables, and a wide porch that surrounded the entire structure on each of the 3 stories. The house had, without a doubt, once been a beautiful and extravagant palace for some wealthy pillar of the town. But over decades, maybe even centuries, no one seemed to have taken care of it, for it had become a ghastly monstrosity, a skeletal mockery of a southern mansion. The paint, perhaps once a bright Caribbean color like you find on St. Charles Avenue in uptown New Orleans, had peeled, warped, and sloughed off like so much burnt skin, leaving a namesake pallid color. Everywhere around the beast, warped wooden panels had sprouted and sprung out from their molds and resembled pockmarks on a leper's face. Windows were broken out here and there, and the entire 3 stories seemed to lean this way and slant that way, resulting in more of a structural lump than a fully functioning residence. An ancient live oak, having managed to thrive in the front yard despite the evidently best efforts of the owners to kill it, had spewed out Spanish moss over the years like semen, drenching the house in trails of the stuff that blew in the wind like the beards of wizened old Chinese kung fu masters. But the crowning glory of the Pallid Horse Bar was, in fact, the Pallid Horse. That is, someone at some point in history had thought it would be a great idea to place an enormous, pale wooden horse on the roof right above the entrance. Perhaps they had meant it to look like the Pallid Horse of the Apocalypse, some sort of stark art piece to stun passers-by, but one of the pallid hooves had pallidly broken in half, causing the gargantuan steed to lurch forward so that its horrific, apocalyptic face now stared down almost at the level of the door. Customers had to walk under the equine stair with only about 1 foot's gap. It was distinctly intimidating, yet simultaneously comical. "God, I love this place," said Scary Mary. "It's freaking beautiful." "Bloody gorgeous it is," admitted Gutter Gil. "Well, I'm thirsty," added Paul Junk, then proudly led the way under the horse's muzzle. The inside decor did not disappoint. The grand staircase was now encircled with an oaken bar, and it looked like all of the mansion's rooms were open for customers to explore. Furniture covered in dusty sheets were like ghosts in the dark recesses of the chambers. Half-broken chandeliers above their heads seemed ready to crash to the floor, and fireplaces and mantels displayed curios from ages long gone. They even saw the occasional creepy doll. "Did we just walk into a horror movie?" asked Scary. "The only horror here is that I ain't had a drink today," said Junk. "Hey, sweetheart, 4 beers, how about it?" A girl around 20 years old with stunningly smooth, deep ebony skin and a large afro smirked at him, then produced 4 beers. She wore a black top with a black motorcycle leather jacket and black shorts with black fishnet stockings. "I'm not your sweetheart. I started a tab for you, so don't run out on me." Gutter Gil chuckled. "This place is certainly, well, different." The bartender nodded and answered, "Oh yeah, best thing going for sure. I even hang out here when I'm not working." Mucky Matt was walking through the various rooms, nodding at the other customers. He seemed glad to see that most people were dressed in rock, punk, or goth attire. Not many normies. A few creepy old people were here and there, probably sad alcoholics. Mucky returned to the bar and asked, "So, what's your name?" "Wouldn't you like to know?" snipped the bartender, causing Matt to start a bit and frown. "Just kidding, man," she said and laughed. "I'm Nancy. I'm the manager here, and as you can see, also a bartender. Who are you guys?" Mary responded before Paul could say something stupid or offensive, because Nancy seemed cool. "We're a punk band from New Orleans. Our name's the Gravediggers. I'm Mary, that's Paul, Matt, and Gil." "So cool," replied Nancy. "Like real punk? Like 80s punk? Not this new crap that people call punk like Gwen Stefani?" "Oh, hell yes," said Mary. "Our music may suck, but we're the real deal. Our idols are the Ramones, Dead Milkmen, Social Distortion, Sex Pistols, Misfits, The Damned, the Circle Jerks, shit like that." "Hell yeah, I love that shit," said Nancy. You have a gig here or something? Never seen you around town." "Well, there's the thing, Nance," interjected Paul, and Mary winced. "We've got a gig in Charleston. Well, we had a gig in Charleston. Looks like we won't make it in time. Scary Mary here doesn't keep her van in good shape, and it crapped out on us." Mary gave him a frown. "So we ended up in the parking lot of this redneck store." "Oh, shit, you mean Red McCoy's place?" asked Nancy. "Sounds right, yeah," affirmed Paul. Nancy laughed and said, "He's a real moron. Him and his son Billy Mack and his hillbilly pack of hicks give this town a bad name. Let me guess, he told you to leave the town and never come back." "About right," said Matt. "Then this tall, thin dude in black shows up on a motorcycle. Red and his rednecks got all quiet and subservient all of a sudden." "Oh, shit," said Nancy. "That had to be Lorman McCoy. He's like one of the town's bosses." "The mayor?" asked Matt. "Something like that, yeah. He shares the power with Andy Hatfield." Paul laughed. "Yeah," acknowledged Nancy. "The Hatfield-McCoy feud. Well, there's sort of an uneasy truce in this town. The McCoys live on the west side, and the Hatfields on the east side. Each says the other side is terrible and theirs is great. Lorman and Andy keep the peace. They seem to get along all right, I guess. Tons of people in Ushaville are Hatfields or McCoys. We have normal people, too." "Wait, are you a Hatfield or McCoy?" asked Mary. "Oh, hell no. I just work for the Hatfields. The Pallid Horse is owned by some of them. I got no beef with either family, but I don't want anything to do with them either. They're all a bunch of hicks, if you ask me." Nancy looked around. "Shit, I hope no one heard that." The band found a dusty, antique table and sat there drinking for a couple of hours. Nancy wiped down the bar while another bartender, a guy in jeans and a white t-shirt, started prepping. She approached their table and took a seat. "Mind if I hang out? I just got off my shift. You guys seem cool, at least compared to some of the people in this town," she said. "Totally," answered Mary. "You're the first cool person we met here." "So, what's the story with your van?" asked Nancy. "That Lorman guy who looks like Joey Ramone said he would take care of having it fixed for us, and then we can leave town tomorrow." Nancy nodded. "Say," asked Gil, "what exactly would happen if we went to the Forbidden East Side? Would we explode or something?" Nancy chuckled. "Well, probably nothing would happen. Both sides know that if they do something stupid and set off another feud war, it will be bad for everyone. I mean, you could walk over there right now. People probably won't be very friendly, but no one's going to actually mess with you. At least, probably not. Hell, I'll go with you. They won't dare do anything if I'm with you. I have protection." She turned around and pulled up her hair, revealing a small red tattoo. It was a circle with a cross inside it. "Protection? What the hell does that mean?" asked Paul. "I know it sounds weird. So, the feud and everything, this town has 3 kinds of residents. First are the McCoys. You know, they live on the west side. They're mostly rich and well-to-do. Their side of town looks like something out of a European fairy tale. The second group is the Hatfields. They're poorer and, as you know, live on the east side. You'll see in a minute how their side is grungier and crappier. They tend to stay to themselves, hanging out in the shadows like creeps. The third group is just normal residents who have nothing to do with the feud and probably don't know much about it anyway. But some of us longtime residents are given this tattoo as a mark of protection. It means we're immune from the feud. People without the mark are usually clueless, but also fair game if the feud resumes. It's fucked up, I know. Come on, I'll show you the east side. Just be cool and you'll be fine." They left the Pallid Horse and headed off in the opposite direction whence they had come. Almost as if there were an actual line painted in the middle of the road, things started to change. The buildings, no longer clean, tidy German row houses and row shops, were now more haphazardly built in a variety of styles, some of them dingy European, others wooden and falling apart. Even the sunlight seemed to reach these streets less, and nature had become grave silent. No birds chirped and no squirrels climbed trees. In windows that were not already obscured with shades, they spotted movement and a sudden drawing of the curtains. Few people were on the streets, and those that were walked close against the buildings in the shadows. Most of them wore black and eyed the group suspiciously. They passed a cruddy building that made the Pallid Horse look like a golden palace. The sign above the door read, "Lust Bar." "How's that bar?" asked the droopy-eyed Matt. "You don't want to go in there. It's really tough, like a biker bar, and they don't like outsiders. They also check for your protection at the door." A gruff bouncer stood at the door and glared at them. Nancy waved to him and the man grunted and nodded. A ruckus emanated from inside. There were other grim, dingy businesses open, as well as some seriously bleak residences. "Well, this sucks," said Matt, yawning. "I think I just got clinical depression." I told you guys this is the dark side, Nancy said and laughed. And it actually is getting dark. Best not to be on the east side after dark. You think it's scary now? Trust me, we need to go. Perhaps we should heed your wisdom, added Gil. Mary chuckled nervously, and the group turned around and stared back toward the west side's relative safety. Shadows were indeed growing long, and people began to come out of their houses. They crept around in the shadows, but as the last lashes of daylight's tongue licked ever softer, they became more daring and approached the streets. Shit, said Nancy under her breath. Oh, that doesn't sound good, dear, said Paul. In fact, it sounds fucking terrifying. Just walk faster, guys, urged Nancy. They could see Unter den Linden Street a few blocks ahead of them. It was the street that divided the east side from the west side. Just need to make it there. Come on, hurry, whispered Nancy. Then a towering, thin man, all in black, stepped from the shadows directly into their path. Nancy gasped. Mary squealed. Paul shrieked like a girl. Wait, is that Lorman McCoy? Oh, never mind, this guy has a beard, asked Gil. Right, that's Andy Hatfield, replied Nancy. Indeed it is, answered Andy Hatfield. Nancy, how nice to see you on this side of town. A rare event indeed. Won't you introduce me to your new friends? He almost hissed the S at the end of friends. Yes, sir. This is Paul, Mary, Gil, and Matt. The four punks were too scared to nod or smile or say anything. And what brings them to our fair city? Asked Andy. Well, sir, they're a band and their van broke down and Mr. McCoy was kind enough to allow them to stay the night while their van is being repaired. I see. And you brought them to the east side? Yes, sir. They wanted to see the whole town, including your lovely neighborhood, sir. Mm-hmm. Lovely, you say? Mocked Andy. Then won't you stay a while longer? Perhaps I could have you all for dinner. They, need to get back, sir, to work on their songs, improvised Nancy. Surely they have time for a drink, say, at the Lust Bar. Paul stammered, We must go, sir, but thank you. And then he ran as fast as he could around Andy and toward Unter den Linden. Andy Hatfield chuckled. I see that you all must indeed be in a hurry. What a shame. We East Siders are a hospitable lot. I'm sure we would have enjoyed spending time with you. Do come back soon, said Andy, opening his black cape with his arm, stepping aside and gesturing the way toward the west side. They needed no prodding to quickly scoot past him and be on their way. As they passed him, he said, And Nancy, don't forget that you have protection. They don't. You know the rules, dear. Yes, sir, she said, while speed-walking toward safety. They made it to Unter den Linden and paused, all gasping for breath. Matt did not yawn. What the bloody hell was that? Asked Paul. Yeah, Andy Hatfield is one scary mofo, said Nancy. And you saw that side of town, right? Now you know why everyone warned you to avoid the east side. That was not even punk, not even cool, added Gil. That was beyond even horror punk and the Misfits. That was downright terrifying, I must say. Yeah, what did he say about your protection tattoo and the rules? Asked Mary in a shaking voice, producing a vibrato that would have made her a good singer if she did not suck so much. Well, there are other things you don't know about this town, and I can't tell you. I'm under oath to Andy, so you can understand why I'll keep it. But I'll just say that the East Siders can be a little, well, violent and criminal. Anyone who goes there without the protection tattoo is fair game. Shit, you mean they can beat us and rob us and shit? Exclaimed Paul. And shit, answered Nancy. And lots of shit. Now you know. Yeah, one visit was enough. Anyone for a nice beer? Asked Matt. Everyone agreed, but Nancy did not want to return to the Pallid Horse, so she took them to another bar called Das Bierhaus. Unlike the Pallid Horse and the terrifying Lust Bar, the Bierhaus was designed like a German beer hall and was actually a little upscale. After the east side, the punks did not mind upscale for once. They all drank late into the night, then the punks returned to their hotel and Nancy to her house. We're going to have to stop there for tonight because of time constraints. I don't mean to leave you hanging, but if you're interested in the book and you want to see how it finishes, I'm going to give you a QR code here that will take you right to my Amazon author page. You can check out the book there. In fact, you can check out all of my horror novels and horror comedy novels there. Thank you for watching the All Things Horror with Matthew Miller Halloween special, and try to avoid the things that go bump in the night. Signing out now, I'm Matthew Miller.